Welcome to TalentWise, a podcast dedicated to identifying and unpacking challenges and solutions related to the workforce. Every episode, we will hear from experts in their fields or industries who are fighting to better understand shifting dynamics. What are those dynamics, you might ask? Put most simply, the workforce crisis we've seen coming for decades is upon us, and most of us are not nearly as ready as we should be. We've hosted expert demographers who've helped us understand the scale and scope of the workforce challenge, and we've heard from industry leaders and human resources professionals tasked with managing strategic efforts to address this problem proactively. Today, we'll explore the role of apprenticeships in sustaining the workforce, specifically a program serving New York City and partners across the country, where a model has been built for communities nationwide. Brent, thank you so much for joining us. Brent Parton is our guest today. He is president of CareerWise. Really appreciate your being here.
It's a pleasure. Good to see you, and excited to dig into a topic I care deeply about, but a timely one at that.
For those listening, Brent is president of CareerWise, a first of its kind modern youth apprenticeship program based in New York City. He leads CareerWise's strategic partnerships, community engagement, and all of its growth with a particular focus on the development of CareerWise's largest market, which is New York City. Throughout his career, Brent has been and remains today a key player in shaping national policies to align education and workforce systems to improve outcomes for youth, industry, and communities. Brent previously was the acting assistant secretary for the Employment and Training Administration at the U.S. Department of Labor. Brent, I've enjoyed spending some time with you in the past. Thank you so much again for your time today. When you and I first met at a National Tank Truck Carriers board meeting, you were in that role as acting assistant secretary for the ETA. What is the ETA, and what led you to your current role at CareerWise?
Thanks again for having me, and excited in any opportunity to kind of talk about these issues, but to talk about it with you, Danny, and the great folks on your team is really a pleasure, since we've had the chance to interact over these years. But in short, I'll get to your question. What is ETA? Well, ETA is the Employment and Training Administration. It is the largest agency at the U.S. Department of Labor. It is the largest dedicated funder of the federally funded workforce system in the United States, which is a partnership with states and local efforts. But each year, the Employment and Training Administration puts about $3 billion of workforce training dollars out into the country to support both adults who have lost their jobs to get the skills they need to connect with a new job. It supports youth who are trying to kind of connect with the labor market and get experience. It focuses direct investments on populations such as returning citizens coming out of incarceration to help them get back on their feet, back to past economic sustainability. But overall, what ETA does is they're both firefighter as well as construction builder, meaning the ETA oversees both the unemployment insurance system as well as the federal workforce system, which means when there is a crisis in the country where you have major dislocations during a plant that's been closed, or a natural disaster, or a pandemic or a great recession, it is the Employment and Training Administration that serves as the front door to workforce development services and training for millions of workers, hundreds of millions of workers over time across the country, to help them find what they need. But it's also a place where you build your workforce up. And so the apprenticeship system, for example, is a big part of what ETA oversees. The Federal Registered Apprenticeship System is, again, a partnership with states, but they work on expanding apprenticeship opportunities in industries like trucking, for example, that are focused on really how do you meet critical workforce needs that are really important for the nation's economy. So overseeing ETA means you're both kind of there to be for people in their worst days, when they're looking for that next opportunity, that next leg up. But it's also a place that really opens up doors to opportunity for young people across this country. And so I'm deeply thankful for the service of the folks that work at ETA, and as well as the folks across this country that are part of the public workforce system.
And so you left ETA, having made a lot of contributions to that organization's goals and objectives. Tell us what led you to CareerWise, and a little bit about how CareerWise works with high school students to connect them to opportunities in the industries where you guys are so focused?
It's great. Well, the story of how I got to CareerWise is one that is actually a story about why I think we need an apprenticeship renaissance in the United States, which is what I described earlier with the Employment and Training Administration. If you add on a lot of the billions of dollars we also fund for workforce training at our community colleges, for example, we really as a country need to be focused on funding what works. And what works in workforce development is what gets people connected to a good paying job and a career. And there is no strategy, no workforce strategy, no program that has the results that stack up to what the registered apprenticeship system is able to deliver. The reason is because an apprenticeship system is not just a training program, it's a real job. And this idea that we should be expanding apprenticeships is catching fire a little bit right now, and has now for several administrations going back to the early days of Obama. But it's a long overdue focus in this country to really rebalance what pathways to opportunity should look like. We need more apprenticeships in this country because there's a lot of people that take out debt to try to get to a job that they don't know if that college program is going to get there. There's a lot of people that are trying to think, well, I'd really like to get new skills and training, but I can't drop out of my current job. I got to support my family. I've got to balance those things. Apprenticeship is an earn and learn pathway that really makes those decisions a lot easier. But we uniquely, I think, to grow these apprenticeship opportunities, we got to start earlier. We've got to get apprenticeships in front of our students. We have to get people excited about the concept of what types of career paths are out there, and we've got to give them a clear next step to engage. CareerWise is one of the few organizations in the United States that is focused on not just expanding apprenticeship programs, but building apprenticeship pathways that directly connect to our high schools, meaning that we are, as a national nonprofit, working across the country, but we're founded in Colorado. We have an office there, of course, that supports our operations. We are here in New York City, where we are working with companies of all sizes and school districts of all sizes to really bridge that gap between what young people think opportunities they have coming out of high school to what types of opportunities are out there. An apprenticeship needs to be a much more mainstream opportunity, and CareerWise is one of the few organizations that not only thinks it's a good idea to provide career exposure for students, and not only a good idea to expand apprenticeship, we're an organization that's trying to do both at once to really kind of change the underlying dynamic of what drives opportunities in this country.
Access to these programs can be as big a challenge as awareness. So thank you for all that you guys do. Talk a little bit about how y'all create those types of hands-on opportunities for businesses to develop sort of work-ready talent with the skills that they need in order to continue to grow their business.
It's a great question. And I will say this, I think this gets into kind of what the CareerWise team and partners do on a day-to-day basis, which is if you want to expand these opportunities, you really have to kind of work three levers at once. One, you got to get in there and work with companies to help kind of really set up what it means to rethink their entry-level talent structures. So that means that for some, particularly our partners in financial services or technology, a college degree was typically a prerequisite before you could even get an interview. So is 5 years work experience. And so the idea that an entry-level job means a college degree and work experience has not worked out very well for a lot of folks that want access to the opportunities, but also just look at the businesses. You can't have an apprenticeship without an employer that's willing to hire an apprentice. So we have to hit the easy button for employers to really think differently about their talent development, to really, make skills-based hiring real by having an actual path for people who don't have a degree yet or don't have years and years of work experience to access these opportunities. So a big part of what CareerWise does is work with employers to not have to start from scratch, to make setting up an apprenticeship program really easy, but critically important, connect with the local schools that we work with in a community. So here in New York, we work with both the companies as well as the schools to actually create that direct pathway, because you can't just create a talent training program as an employer and not have new talent to recruit from. Right. So again, it goes back to this essence of what CareerWise does is not only are we working on these new innovative earn and learn pathways that meet critical talent needs for employers, we're actually opening up access to a previously untapped talent pool, which is excited, eager, and interested young people graduating from high school. So what we do is we really bridge that gap. So here in New York City, we are partnered with 70 high schools within New York City, NYCPS, New York City Public Schools. We're partnered with over 36 employers in the public and private sector, which range from agencies in the city of New York to JP Morgan Chase, Accenture, Amazon. And what we actually do is create new pathways and programs that directly connect young people who are applying for these apprenticeships, whether they're sophomores or juniors in high school. They're starting on the job learning before they graduate, and it really carries them through to that opportunity on the other side in these 2 to 3 year apprenticeship programs. It's really innovative work. It's kind of pushing it's pushing the realm of what people thought was possible. In Colorado, we work with mostly small and medium-sized businesses. In New York, you're working with some of the largest talent corporations in the world, yet you see them implementing the similar type of model with fidelity that shows whether you're in suburban Denver or whether you are in Midtown Manhattan. This idea of an apprenticeship can really transform the opportunities, not just for a young person, but lead to real return on investment for the employers that invest in it.
What y'all are doing is amazing, and you're fitting unmet needs sort of on both sides of the equation. And I mean, that's part of what makes you guys so special. And, in this environment, one of the reasons your work is even more important is because workforce participation nationally is declining, and it's been declining since 2008, after, as you know, peaking around 2000. What do you see as the obstacles to getting a greater percentage of people who are workforce ready and able, getting them to participate in the workforce today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say one is you have to actually create open doors for them to walk through. And I think we have under focused on what I call kind of the working learner in this country. And there are people who are maybe working a part-time job, maybe driving for Lyft or Uber, who are maybe working, doing some childcare opportunities or taking care of a loved one, who are also trying to take college courses.
Yep.
And they're doing these things at night. They're trying to balance on opportunities. Right now, we look at those as students. I think the aspirations of a lot of those folks is to get a great job and to get into the labor market in a way that they can have a career, that they can have a family sustaining wage, that they can actually make a difference for themselves and their families and get off the hamster wheel of kind of dead end jobs. And so when it comes to what does it mean to get more folks into the labor market, we have to ask ourselves into what types of jobs, because that often labor market participation rate is only measuring some forms of employment. What at the end of the day, people do is they have aspirations for themselves and their families. And so the idea of things like apprenticeships that make that balance between working and learning and accelerating your career much more human-centered and able to tackle rather than trying to coexist in 5 different worlds of taking care of a loved one, working a part-time job, and taking college classes, getting that population supported and connected to real careers and jobs, that should be a huge priority for us. And I think apprenticeships and earn and learn programs are a big part of it. I also tend to think, though, that if we put up barriers for certain types of jobs, and I think I really do support the efforts across the country to kind of, quote, tear the paper ceiling and really rethink entry-level work requirements, getting people experience much earlier on about what is labor, what does it mean to show up at work? Some of that stuff we always hear of, can you look someone in the eye and shake their hand? We have to push those experiences much younger than we do as a country today. Students in our country are far too advanced in their experience before they ever maybe get to see someone from the community or the workforce come in and talk about types of jobs or careers that are opportunities. That exposure really matters. Getting true work experience that must be paid. Not everybody can take an unpaid internship. In fact, most of us can't. I knew I couldn't when I was growing up. The idea that we should be creating a system that actually can deliver at scale. Where are the connections to work? What types of experiences are in there in your community? You can't be what you can't see. But at the same time, if companies are still recruiting based on college degrees in some areas or in other areas based on who the old FBI, friends, brothers, and in-laws, you are not making the connections to the community that you are trying to tap into. That is really critical for future talent, but also really critical for having people really engage and understand where there are opportunities. So I would just say, like, we should be really thoughtful about how are we engaging in career paths and work experience sooner. That should be a focused policy discussion I care deeply about in the apprenticeship space. It's a little bit of a different thing about, incentives to work and others. I think if we get the first part right, the second part will be in a much better place.
A lot of our conversations have focused on, in order to get that sort of piece of the pie right, you really need at the national level, but almost more importantly in local areas, you need to have the business community and the education community engaged in a very meaningful and effective way. And then they need to go out and tell the economic developers in that community, this is where we are making our bets, and these are the types of businesses we can serve well. So, given all of that, how would you characterize the importance amongst local communities, states, and our nation to continue to invest in apprenticeship programs and these types of initiatives?
Well, take your question in two parts, which is how important for local. And I think it's essential. At the end of the day, if there is not local mobilization of partners and both the public and private sector to solve this issue, it won't be solved. Because at the end of the day, people are educated locally and they're hired locally. At the same time, though, then we should ask ourselves, what are the investments or the supports that are needed to get more places across the country to set these efforts up? You can look across the country today. Obviously, there's the work we're doing here in New York City. Go to the state of North Carolina. Across the state of North Carolina, there's these incredible regional consortia of small, medium-sized manufacturing companies that kind of got together with the school systems and the local community colleges. Some of them were from German, Swiss, Austrian descent, and they were just kind of like, how are you going to develop a workforce here? We don't ask ourselves that question in the United States. It takes sort of that foreign prodding, I guess, to do it. But the point is they got together and just solved the problem. And what you see too often happening in the U.S. is the finger pointing. The schools need to produce this, and then we'll hire people. Then the schools say, you need to tell us exactly what you need and hire people so we can produce it. And that is just not a way that we can solve these issues. It's what I call kind of a skills gap blame game. And so what you actually need are strong, robust partnerships between public sector and private sector, where it's not building solutions for one employer, one small little program at a time, but doing what you said about like economic developers. What are the industry sectors that are going to drive prosperity and development? We all need healthcare services. We all are looking at transportation and transit. We all have skilled trades and building needs. Some of us might be more focused on manufacturing, some more on life sciences. But the point is that communities really need to be thinking about what are those drivers of growth? Where do you want to see more of people retained in your community and getting access to these opportunities for this workforce? We see far too often people importing the workforce from other states because they're not focused on connecting those opportunities in their local community. It's all about how communities kind of align their strategy. Our job at the federal and state level, but also organizations like CareerWise, which is kind of like a national nonprofit, we call ourselves an intermediary, is to go make that work easier, to make sure that no community has to start from scratch. We will never meet the scale that's needed in this country to tackle our educator and healthcare workforce shortages one community at a time. We'll never be successful at reindustrializing or reshoring our country if every single manufacturing firm has to solve for this at the local level. We'll never build a modern infrastructure or grid if every community's figuring it out from scratch. We need to be thinking about how investments put those communities in the right place, put the resources on the ground to support good work, but then provide good assistance and support and partnerships with organizations like CareerWise to set these efforts up and get them going.
Are there particular industries that you feel are doing this exceptionally well that you kind of point to as that is a group of visionaries who are able to get aligned and get a lot done? And are there any, you may not want to speak to this, but are there any that you think are really in need, or that leadership may be lacking today, but where there's great opportunity?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a couple things I'll say to this point is there are some industry sectors that maybe we associate with apprenticeship by name that for a reason, because it's actually a great way to build the workforce. And this country still, by and large, are building in skilled trades. They carry the tradition of apprenticeship. And when people think of apprenticeship in the United States, they're often thinking of an electrician. They're thinking of a pipe fitter. They're thinking of, a steel worker. And there's a long storied tradition and really critical leadership in the building and skilled trades, particularly with joint employer partners that have carried that on. It is where you do not have a tradition of apprenticeship, but you have more of these acute needs that I think that's where the focus of organizations like CareerWise and others needs to be, because we don't have to build some for the building trades. That's the infrastructure's there, it's up and running. But there are certain jobs in our manufacturing sector, which has been resurgent, where you look at the technician roles, the roles around the people who can kind of help put together, maintain, and run the really high-tech machinery within a modern manufacturing facility. These are folks that need some form of post-secondary education and training, but at the same time, they're folks that it really depends on where you're at, what that firm's technology is, what their business line is. The apprenticeship is an opportunity to really kind of balance the highly specific firm need with what the industry needs at scale. And so manufacturing, to me, will continue to be a backbone of a lot of these efforts. But the big ones that we're seeing a lot of growth right now, potential, is in teaching, K-12 teachers. We went from 2 states in the United States that had a teacher apprenticeship program about 4 years ago to now 47.
Wow.
Have also, and that's not because we just think it's a good idea, it's raw need. Raw need of being able to address this issue for students in our classrooms. Wow. and recruit and grow your own teaching talent that knows what it's getting into, that wants to stay in that job, that's experienced the day they set it into the classroom. Healthcare, huge growth in healthcare. It's actually, I think, one of the fastest growing occupations in the apprenticeship system. Well, I should say industries, because it's a lot of different occupations. On one hand, healthcare really challenging. You got a lot of segmented, pieces of the workforce, but when you can put that pathway together, massive need. And we have a huge effort here in New York City to really kind of do a first of its kind kind of earn and learn path for New York City public students into clinical roles. Outside of that, I would say, the things that we have seen a lot of growth in early stage of more, I would call, especially with changes in technology, our largest roles are in business operations, in finance, and human resources. Really flex roles for apprenticeships that let employers load in new technology skills and talent. But really what you're bringing a young person in is to learn your culture, to really know what your opportunities are, to really kind of grow your workforce internally. It feels like insurance that maybe aren't the sexiest areas to achieve, but have really interesting tech-enabled roles available to young people. And so I see some of these more kind of generalized business operations roles continuing to be a area of growth as well, because it allows companies to really deploy talent towards, do I need it in HR? Do I need it in finance? Do I need it in project management, or a sort of a technologist type of team? So those are just spatterings of kind of some insights on the sector point. But for the most part, any field with a need and any field that has that real pathway to a good, famous-sustaining career is something worth examining on the apprenticeship front.
Flipping the script a little bit from employers and sort of policymakers to the youth, what are some of the impediments that you all hear about in your work to young people who are looking to enter the workforce or find access to apprenticeship programs like CareerWise?
There aren't enough apprenticeships. And I always say the day that we can't fill an apprenticeship opportunity is the day we were successful. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of views in this country that people won't accept something that doesn't look like the traditional college path after high school, or that there's a bias against apprenticeship. And there's truth to that. Like there is no doubt that the way that our education systems are structured, there is an incentive and a value put on go to college right after high school. I think, though, that what that operates under is an old mental model of what apprenticeship is. Community colleges are one of the biggest partners in the delivery of apprenticeship programs in this country. And so this idea that it's college or apprenticeship kind of flies in the face of the reality that a lot of apprentices that we see across the country are earning college credit, working towards college degrees while they are doing their apprenticeships. And so I think one of the things that we hear a lot is there's a college for all culture out there that apprenticeship is swimming against. And I think there's truth to that. But until you kind of unpack the reality that it's not that apprenticeship is trying to kind of end college for all, it's that apprenticeship is rethinking what college should be and what it could look like. And I think that it's a little bit just more of a nuanced message, but one that reflects the reality of what's happening out in the landscape. But that said, we still all have in the image of our minds that college is a bunch of kids throwing frisbees on a lawn. What we all know is that most of the college students in this country are working learners, as I was saying earlier, folks that are balancing work and learning at the same time. Apprenticeship lets you do that in a way that what you are working on is relevant to what you're studying, and the end point in mind is a career. We did message testing with high school students and parents years ago before I was with CareerWise about apprenticeship for high school students. And the thing that we constantly heard was people aren't pissed about taking out debt for college if it pays off. What they really get pissed about is the slingshot, that they pay for college or they take out debt and they don't make it through, or they're back in the basement, right? And this idea that it's a really expensive career exploration program. Mm-hmm. If what apprenticeship can actually do is help you make decisions about what you want to further your studies in and degree, that's a great thing. Or if you want to stay, keep working with the company, the whole point of an apprenticeship is to end in that opportunity and that job as well, or both. Continue to kind of go work towards that, being that engineer once you're in that technician role. So I feel that we're swimming upstream of this idea that we have to have a monolith of what it means to do after high school. And what we know is only at best 4 out of 10 of high school students will go right into college and graduate within 6 years. So there's another 6 to 7 out of 10 that we have to be rethinking what that post-secondary experience looks like. So you're battling perceptions on that front, absolutely. But at the end of the day that we have enough apprenticeships out there from employers that there's more of those available than what students are seeking, which I promise you, all of our apprenticeship programs are oversubscribed in terms of applicants. Employers really get to be selective, which they like, about who they pick and want a ratio to pull from. But the day we have that problem, we will have been successful.
It's amazing to be able to tell your supporters that part of your vision is to work yourself out of a job. I know you're a long way away from that moment. What advice do you have to those people who are looking to enter the workforce or to invest time in building their careers other than just like go out there and find it?
Yeah. It's never too soon to start. And I think sometimes there's a tension though between your starting career exploration and you're making some determination about what your future will be. Yep. And I think that's again that's an unnecessary trade-off. And CareerWise was inspired by the Swiss apprenticeship system. And it's core to the story of our founder, Noel Ginsberg, who came from the manufacturing world, started CareerWise, working with then Governor Hickenlooper in Colorado to really kind of scale things across the state. But it was inspired by the Swiss system. And the Swiss system has a couple of features that I think are always important for Americans to understand to answer that question. One, remember what I said just a second ago, that 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10, about depends on what year you check the data, high school students will complete college within 6 years. You go to Switzerland and nearly 7 out of 10 Swiss students start with apprenticeship. So they've completely inverted this model of saying, like, there's still a lot of Swiss students that go to what would be the equivalent of 4-year institutions. It's about on par with us. The difference is they have this other robust option as well that allows them to pursue that kind of post-secondary goal. And so what you learn, though, from the Swiss system is like, to sustain that amount of apprenticeships, the point is to not employ everyone in that profession that they're doing apprenticeships in. Like, sure, there's cheese making and agriculture, but most Swiss apprenticeships are in business operations. They're in finance. They're in manufacturing. It's one of the leading, most globally competitive precision manufacturing sectors. But the point is to get exposure and experience. And for example, the incoming president of Switzerland was an agriculture apprentice. The head of UBS was an apprentice in a completely different field. So like the point is that we think of apprenticeship as like your destination, your endpoint. And unfortunately, I think we think about that sometimes in terms of what career exploration is and when it's too soon to have these conversations. The Swiss apprentices start when they're 16 years old, which means in seventh grade, they're doing career exploration activities to try to make those kind of views. But they are able to do that because there's not only an understanding, but a reality that it's not an endpoint, that it is something that is this next step on this journey. And so I think that advice of recognizing whether it's through apprenticeship or just where you're choosing to kind of do your first summer job or where you're trying to kind of, get an internship or just how you think about your future is the things. I think we can do a lot more for this country, be more guided and supported for people in making concrete decisions about those things. But at the same time, recognize that it does not have to be deterministic to make that type of commitment. In fact, you might learn a lot along the way.
Tell our listeners how they can learn more about the work you're doing and the resources that you guys make available for businesses and leaders in various communities. Absolutely.
So if you're in New York, whether in New York City, we also have a partner in Buffalo. You can find us at CareerWise NewYork.org. If you're in Colorado, CareerWiseColorado.org. But I think for the kind of catch-all for folks across this country is CareerWiseUSA.org. And that's really our national umbrella organization that, again, we work with communities and partners, whether you're a company trying to explore what an apprenticeship could look like, whether you're a school leader trying to figure out how do I get involved with this type of effort to create these opportunities for my students, or if you're someone trying to figure out what this could mean for my community and have a lot of great colleagues and partners that have been trying to get at these issues for some time. And I feel that sometimes we're rarely coming in on blank slates. In every community across this country, you have high school leaders that are trying to create work-based learning or opportunities or career exposure. You have community colleges that are doing great workforce training programs. You have employers that are trying to partner with those education institutions and work with their communities. At the end of the day, apprenticeship is about how do you get everybody to kind of do their piece. And no one's going to change completely. Employers aren't all of a sudden going to become altruistic. No, they have a for-profit motive. They have to have a return on investment of this. Schools aren't going to turn on a dime, and colleges are like aircraft carriers. They take time to move around. And so apprenticeship is about not blaming any one entity, but it's also not putting the burden of change on any one entity. It's trying to get those partners to change what they do and to sync it up and do it in a way that creates a better result for everybody involved. And so whether you're sitting in one of those partnership sectors or whether you recognize there's great stuff happening in my community, I just want to take it to the next level, we're happy to be a resource for you.
That's great information. Well, you are a wealth of information on these and other topics. I think we've explored a lot about apprenticeships and the workforce. What is something about you that people tuning in might find surprising, maybe that happens outside of the world of work and workforce and apprenticeships?
Wow, broke me up on that one. I would say I am currently in the process of my own apprenticeship, known as being a father to an 18-month-old, which consumes a pretty decent amount of what have been otherwise interesting free time that I would deploy elsewhere. But I think overall, it's I try in this work, which I always say this about this work in itself. You meet a lot of folks from different backgrounds and places. You don't go to school to learn how to do this work. It's learned by doing for sure. And what I try to always recognize and value, and because I true in myself, I'm a history major by background. I believe I read exclusively nonfiction. I like to cook. I like to do things that tap into a lot of different parts of the brain. And I think that's what apprenticeship is about. At the end of the day, is like it's learning, but it's also doing at the same time. And so the folks that are drawn to it, I think, have a deep appreciation for the needing to flex both sides of your brain, which I try to do myself, whether that's in my free time, which is much less than it once was 18 months ago, or just in work and in life. And I think that there's great dignity in that no matter what you do. But at the same time, I think that's what keeps things exciting and interesting as well.
Well, parenthood is a wonderful experience. So congratulations. You also have, I guess, on some level, my sincere condolences on, some of the days can be very long, but the weeks and months and years, if you let them just fly by. My dad always used to tell me, every year is better than the year before. He never put it in writing, despite my request. Brent, thank you so much for joining us today. It is really good to see you again. Congratulations on all you and your colleagues are doing and achieving at CareerWise. We hope everyone listening, whether at home or on your commute or at your desk, hope you'll join us again next time. Thanks so much,
Brent. Danny, and thanks for the great work you do. Appreciate the time, and maybe you'll have me back once we run into that little challenge of having too many apprenticeships and not enough students.
Well, I hope we don't wait that long if it takes a long time, but I hope that time arrives sooner than we all think that it might. So thank you so much, Brent. Really appreciate you, man.
Thanks, Danny.